Good morning. Dr. Jitka Fedyczkova. I am senior lecturer in health and social care with the Open University, and I was invited to join your coffee morning today and for us to talk about aging and ways to age well and what it is we may want to learn and or do differently as we all grow older, because we all are, unfortunately. We haven't found a way to stop aging, but there are quite a few ways that we can actually use or utilize to make our aging better, smoother, and avoiding steep decline, avoiding injuries or traumas, etc. So this session will be full of tips that me and my team have found through our long-standing public engagement, research, and knowledge exchange, mainly with the Open University, but also outside of that. Without further ado, I will make a start. This slide is a bit busy. It is about all the organizations. I'm thanking everyone for support and mainly for funding as well, because some of the work I'm going to talk about is funding. And today we are here to talk and learn together about aging. So as I said earlier on, the aging is not something we can avoid altogether. There are ways for us to age well, to stay well, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So we all know that the world population is rapidly aging, and more than 16 million people in the UK are over the age of 60. This means that certain physical and psychological cognitive decline happens, and it happens at different speed for different individuals. It also happens at different speed within one individual. So different systems would be aging in one person differently. So it is the main reason, or the main reasons, why aging is so incredibly difficult to predict. We also may want to take into account some genetic predispositions, but overall, regarding the overall aging process, it is incredibly important about what we do. So it is codified, but by what we can do about it, and the sooner we start look after our health and well-being and making steps in that direction, the sooner our body will kind of regroup, get fit, become more resilient. And of course, this will also influence our psychological and emotional health and well-being. So physical, psychological, social, emotional health and well-being is something that works together. And it's quite tightly interlinked, so we cannot really separate it. But because different things demonstrate differently for different individuals, some people might, as they age, as they grow older, the decline might start being on the physical side, but eventually it will be seen and viewed on the psychological, emotional, or psychological side as well. So it may start on one side, but it will always be demonstrated in the other. So we really need to look at aging holistically and take all into account. There is one beautiful motto that was already invented by the time I started doing my PhD ages ago. It's use it or lose it. So in other words, there is a bit of cognitive decline, physical decline that's associated naturally with aging. It's to be expected. But the cognitive and physical functions we do not want to lose. We do need to take care of. So our brain has something that's called plasticity, which is an incredible function and enables us to adapt and survive and get used to new environments. But as we grow older, this plasticity might be slightly decreasing, and our brain, if it wants to keep this plasticity, it would be cutting off things that we have learned ages ago, but we're not using, because the brain will be thinking, okay, this is just sitting here, it's not doing anything, and I need more space to do other things. So it was just chop this off. So that's why use it or lose it is such a fitting motto, really, also because it's not something that happens as we grow older only. It starts happening as soon as we're born. So the brain learns, and you all probably have an experience in your life where you have learned something. For some of us, it might have been language in secondary school, or primary school, where we've learned a few words, we've learned enough to hold a conversation. But as we grow older, we have learned many other things, and we had not had chance to practice that conversation in that particular language. 20 years later, we might actually realize, oh gosh, I can't remember anything. I used to be able to have a conversation, now I can't. So this is it's exactly the same principle that happens throughout our lifespan. It's not something that will start being demonstrated when we're 65 and over. It's something that happens across the lifespan. We just do not notice it so much when we're younger, but it is nevertheless it is there in the background. So use it or lose it is an incredible way to kind of really regroup and think what it is I don't want to lose, which then would be what I need to take care of and use in regular basis. So the questions about how do I stay healthy, how do I keep active, how do I keep my mind in shape so that I can enjoy good quality life for longer are naturally questions that pop up with increasing age. And as we know, aging is not optional, but the way we age depends a lot on everyday decisions we make about our health. And with this in mind is how I kind of founded the Aging While Public Talk series 5 years ago. And as part of this Aging While Public Talk series, we're exploring what aging brings about naturally to us all. And we use a simple model of 5 pillars that encompass nutrition, hydration, physical, social, and cognitive stimulation. And we structure the talks around these pillars. So every single talk within the series, and we have 11 talks a year, so it makes one talk every month, with the exception of August. Every talk that we kind of bring within this series has a close tie to at least one of the pillars. The 5 pillars came about quite naturally as a model that really then started working really well and was well appraised, which is why we stayed with it. And you will hear much more about it later on, because it is also a founding base for another intervention that we came up with colleagues more recently. So here we go: nutrition, hydration, physical, social, and cognitive stimulation. So throughout the Aging While Public Talk series, we're creating bridges, and that's the ethos behind it. Create bridges between communities to allow for mutual flow of information. So we employ participatory approaches, co-design, co-production. We invite members of public, whether these are people with lived experience of aging at different stages, or people living with multiple conditions or long-term conditions, or practitioners, professionals, sometimes clinicians, who support aging populations in their professional roles. And we invite everyone on board, and we say, okay, you've heard so far these talks. What else it is you would be interested to hear about in the next seasons of talks? So it is a co-creation, co-production of these talks. We co-designed the program, and then the partners, the public, as I said, whether it's people with lived experience of aging or living with a multiple chronic condition, or clinicians or practitioners, would then come and also deliver or co-deliver together a talk that has a specific title. We are engaging and empowering populations to self-management and becoming partners in their own health. This is a very important point about the Aging While Public Talk series, and has been there since the very first talk, since the very beginning, because we all have in us a key to our own health and well-being. The thing is just to find it and know what is good for us, know ourselves, knowing what doesn't work so well for us. And when we know that, it is a first big step towards actually being partner in our healthcare, because we all have every now and then, we're all service users. Every now and then we go to the doctor and we say, look, I have this problem or that problem. And the doctor might say, okay, let's suggest this treatment and let's try it out. If the treatment's not working for us, we are in a very tricky position, because sometimes we don't feel we want to go back to the doctor and say, look, it's not working, I need something different. And the doctor might say, so why is it not working? And the Aging Well Public Talk series help people to understand what it is we should be able to do even though we're aging, what aging brings about as a decline that does not have to be steep, and that we still should retain a good amount of capabilities, skills, and opportunities to go out, have conversations, feel well throughout the day, not feeling constantly fatigued, for example. And when this happens, it might be sometimes due to the medication we're taking. So going back to the doctor and saying, actually, I've started the medication you prescribed, but as a result, I'm really feeling more tired. I go less outside, I meet fewer people, and I don't feel it's contributing to my well-being. Then the doctor will be kind of prompted to either change the medication or maybe adjust the dosage, because sometimes that helps. So having these conversations is incredibly important, because you will know what feels right and what doesn't. And it's really important to let the clinicians know, because they can only help you as much as you tell them whether it's working or not. And through this, work of facilitating a step change in service users' behavior and support existing health and social care services provision, which are very important. We're also providing easy-to-use resources to wide audiences, and I'm going to share a glimpse of those later, and connecting sustainable and already existing work support programs offered by various organizations and networks that already exist in 4 nations: England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. So this is an example of the Aging Well Public Talk series. I'm just trying to make this black thing disappear. Sorry. This is just an example of how the talks work. We have one talk every month, and as you see, the topics are quite varied. So we talk about how prepared are we to live longer, which already implies the message about we need to be the ones who will make decisions about our health and well-being. We need to be partners in our care. We talk about menopause, we talk about taking control of dying or learning to the top, and how this can empower us to do things in life we didn't really think were possible. We talk about how to boost memory by spending time outdoors, about doing anything but being sedentary, because being sedentary is really not good for us. It's not so much the exercise bit, it's about not sitting most of the day, so avoiding sitting wherever possible. We also talk about hobbies, life thriving, not just surviving talk. We talk about ways to eat well and stay well, making friends in blue-green spaces, culture in language learning for older adults, and also delivering inclusive health services for ethnic minority older people. So as you can see, the talks are quite varied. These talks are free. You can join. I am happy if you leave your email address in the chat, and Sarah is happy to share this with me. I can add you to the mailing list, so you can actually receive alerts about the upcoming talks. We send usually about 2 emails per month. So one email would alert you this talk is coming up, and the next email would say, this is the link to the recorded talk. Here's what's next in the series. So we don't clock mailboxes, but we do share a little bit of information what's coming up. There is also a separate stream to that. So quite organically, a continuous professional development stream developed, working with health and social care commissioners and providers. And these are usually tailored talks to specific audiences. So sometimes these audiences might be people living with a specific condition. I have worked with quite a few via carers in Northamptonshire and the Integrated Care in Northamptonshire organization. And we have organized many talks for people, for example, living with heart failure and their carers, or people living with diabetes and their carers. And or there are other organizations such as care homes that come to me and say, could we do a talk for our members of staff and volunteers? We would like to train them to support the populations they actually care for as part of their work better. So this is kind of a specifically organically developed new stream engaging my public talk series. We usually talk about cognitive aging and tiredness of the cognitive systems and whether it is okay to not remember names so well or taking a bit of time to find the correct word. Remember where objects are located. The thing is that all this is normal and it has to do with the wear and tear throughout the lifespan of all our organs and of course brain. But sometimes when we can experience this when we're younger as well, when we don't sleep amazingly, when we have little children and they wake up in the middle of the night and it's been ages since we really slept, it affects us as well. So we do experience all that throughout the lifespan, not only as we grow older. The difference is that when this happens earlier in our life, we often sleep it off and the regeneration of the organism is better and faster than when it is when we are older, over 65, 70 years of age, and when the wear and tear on all our organs has been actually greater. So it is all part, though, of natural, physiological, normal expected aging. We talk about the brain and we talk about the neurons and what neurons we want and we need for good function of our brain. So as you see, those two neurons, the one on the right is the one that is more stimulated. So through physical activity, social stimulation, cognitive stimulation, so exercising, talking to people, going outdoors, learning new things, being interested about what's happening around us, we're growing those dendrites that make the neuron look like a very rich tree with a rich root system and rich crown. And the beauty is that the more we grow those branches and roots, the dendrites, the better the neurons connect in between themselves in the brain. So by growing the neurons, through stimulation, we actually use the brain better and optimize the function with and without aging. So it is really important to stimulate our brain. And we usually share a few recommendations, continuing doing things we've done throughout our lifespan and we enjoy because it's important for us to come back to it. So there needs to be a regularity with which we do certain things. It needs to be often enough, but also importance of what we call mental sweats, which is learning new things and sometimes taking music lessons or learning new language or learning new dance or trying aqua aerobics, something we haven't really done before. And we need to focus super hard to actually get it all. Is a brilliant example of an extra stimulation that sometimes is also called mental sweat. So the best way to do is to combine the two, of course. And there is really not one cognitive activity that is being recommended as a prevention or for reducing type of dementia risk or Alzheimer's disease, which is one of the type of dementias. But it is usually the combination of activities. So ideally, this would encompass some exercise or physical activity, cognitive activity, as well as social stimulation. So, and social interactions are also a great way to stimulate the mind. Usually, it is the combination that is winning, that is the winner, and really supports preserving cognitive function in older age. We also talk a lot about nutrition within the series. We talk about why is it we need a nutrition. We are all aware that if we eat a lot, we might have a lot of spare energy for activities. But before our energy goes into activities or can be spared on activities, the body takes its tax, and the tax goes for body repair functions and thermoregulation, because thermoregulation is incredibly important, and keeping our organs at the right temperature supports their optimal functioning, and that's a body's job to make sure that it has enough for that. Sometimes we might struggle a bit if we are in houses that are not well heated, especially through the winter or through a cold month of May, as we have this year, because this May is really not very warm. So there are ways, sometimes we're just feeling that we're cold and can't warm up. So one ways of warming up or helping the body to keep the body temperature is the nutrition intake. So we might actually find out that we're eating much more in colder days, which is normal. But it might be also a good idea not to be sedentary and to keep moving about, which you expend some of that food you've had, but you're also contributing to the warm blood being really streamed through the vessels and capillaries and arteries to every part of our body. So food is very important, and we need to keep an eye on what we eat, how we eat it as we age, because we will always need a protein, we will always need some carbohydrates, and we will always need some fat. So making sure that we have a good combination of the three in the proportions that work for us, of course, because we're all different. We all react differently, or our bodies react differently to the same food. So some of us cannot have too much of this, some of us cannot have too much of something else. So it is really important to know what it is that we like, what it is that our body needs, and what it is that makes us good. Because malnutrition and undernutrition are not uncommon in older age. So the older we get, the more we still need to keep an eye on making sure we had fat, carbohydrates, and enough of protein in our kind of diet. Then we talk a lot about hydration as well. So we talk about the strict minimum, which is usually around 1.5 liters of liquids in a day. Tea, coffee counts, but water is good. Water is slightly better. Ideally, we would be drinking between 6 to 8 cups, or what equals as 6 to 8 cups every day. Ideally, water would be most of it, or weak herbal teas. The trouble is that if we drink tea, only tea, and we drink it with milk and sugar, it is very nourishing in a way because it has many calories, but it doesn't have the right nutrients for our body. So our body thinks that this is food, especially if we have milk and sugar in the tea. And then it makes pancreas inject insulin into the bloodstream. And if we drink sweet and milky teas throughout the day, and then in between we eat as well, the pancreas is constantly in action. When we use the pancreas a lot, at some point it will start producing less insulin because it's just going to be tired. So when we produce less insulin, it makes us prone to glucose intolerance, which is a pre-stage of diabetes type 2. So in order to avoid all that, if you need to have milk and sugar in your tea, it might be best to have it together with a meal. And in between the meals, to perhaps let the pancreas rest and have just water. Water is good for us. And also when we take medication, especially if we take more than one pill in a day, it is a good idea to stay well hydrated, because as we grow older, naturally, our metabolism will be slowing down. It's a normal part of age-related changes. It's something to be expected. Nevertheless, if the metabolism slows down, it means that if we take medication, it makes our organs work even more. So it might slow down the organ even more on top of what the aging already does. If we're dehydrated, the metabolism slows even more, which means that some of the medication that we took at some point in the day might be still trailing in the body and shouldn't be where it is now, because if we're dehydrated, everything will be working slower. So if we do take medication, a good habit is to make sure we have a glass of water or two with every pill we take, to make sure we support flushing it out of the body as soon as possible. So what we want from the medication is to come in, have the treatment effect, and then disappear, just get eliminated as soon as possible. And the more we drink, the better we stay hydrated, the more we're making sure it's not staying in our body longer than necessary. We're also, by staying well hydrated, we're eliminating the risk of having side effects from medications. And as I said, tea, coffees are fine. Water is even better. So if we can maybe have a glass of water for every cup of tea or coffee that we have in a day, it might be a way for us to not necessarily, well, cutting a little bit maybe on teas and coffees, but not kind of stopping them altogether, because we all like teas and coffees, and sometimes it's a habit and it's comforting, and it's in some other ways it might be good for us, but maybe thinking in proportions to, if I have this cup of tea, maybe I should have a glass of water before I have another tea or coffee. So it's just different ways of thinking about hydration. Alcohol is not an amazing way to hydrate. It's because it might potentially dehydrate us, because we're going to go and wee much more. We're going to go to the toilet much more. And also, alcohol has calories, but not nutrients. So we might be getting calories, but not the right nutrients for us, for our diet. And also, alcohol often might interfere with the medications we're taking. So kind of there is the recommended level of units or amount of units, which is 14 units per week. But because there are very few research studies on how alcohol exactly behaves, nevertheless, we know enough that daily intake of alcohol can prompt some types of cancer. It can prompt some other diseases and illnesses as well. So the best amount of alcohol is probably no alcohol. But if we keep it to maybe 1 or 2 units per day, it still doesn't have a lot of harmful effects. So easy on alcohol. It's not exactly a hydration that we want. There are winning strategies, of course, to preserve muscle and bone health. So we also talk a lot about muscle and bones and bone health, which all these contribute heavily to. So making sure we have plenty antioxidants, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, exercise, which can be resistance training if it works for us. It can be just walking for some other. Having folic acid and adequate protein intake in the nutrition is very important, because protein is the building block of our muscles. So if we want to have healthy bones, we need to make sure we have healthy muscles, because the healthy muscles contribute to healthy bones and help to prevent osteoporosis. But to have healthy muscles, we need to make sure we are not sedentary a lot or all the time. We have enough activities and exercise that keep us up and about, and we also have enough protein intake in our diet. We also talk about osteoporosis within the series. We know that it's often triggered by menopause. It is mostly a problem for women, although some men suffer from osteoporosis as well. The osteoporosis usually comes because it's a reaction to a sudden change in the hormonal chaining. So if there is suddenly a lot less of one hormone, it brings changes to what other hormones are being released. It changes the whole hormonal balancing of the system, and something will give. If we are not fit, if we do not exercise, if we're sedentary, if we're dehydrated, and if we're potentially malnourished, the chances are that osteoporosis is going to be a huge problem for us, because we will not have muscles that will be protecting the bone in 2 ways. So muscles actually protect the bone. I have a nice picture here. So as you see, the muscles are usually wrapped around the bones. So they protect the bone as a effective padding for as long as the muscles are kind of in use, that are not atrophying, that we're not losing the muscles unnecessarily. So they provide padding, but also through physical activity, the muscles grow more capillaries inside. And the more capillaries are inside, the more nutrition goes to the muscle, but also to the bone. The muscle is wrapped around. From the perspective, from the mechanical perspective, having healthy muscles is really crucial for preventing the condition of the frail bone. And now you can see that this is a normal bone matrix. And on the picture below, this is an osteoporotic matrix where the bone density is poorer and the bone is more porous. So then it makes the bone more fragile from the inside to break if there is an impact, if we fall, if we hit ourselves on a corner of a table. And especially if we don't have enough of a muscle that's actually providing the padding, mechanical padding as well. We've already talked about this. Physical activity is also very important for blood circulation. It prevents muscle atrophy, it protects the bone, and it also supports good basic metabolic rate. So as I said, the metabolism is slowing. It's a normal change associated with as we grow older. But the physical activity or regular exercise or just not being sedentary, moving around, helps to keep the metabolic rate ticking. Another thing that helps is also good hydration. So staying hydrated and not being sedentary is really a good combination to think of. We also talk about posture and how posture changes as we grow older, what changes it inflicts on us, and what it means for our balance and stability. So that's usually some of the talks are aiming at kind of supporting, bringing in the knowledge and understanding about what it is we can do to brace ourselves against changes on our posture that would come too early, too soon, and that can be preventable. And we are going to tackle this just now. So I will pause the sharing here. I am happy to take any questions if you have questions.
A question from Edna. If I drink 1 glass of wine, low volume, 4%, one time a week is good for, is good for us, isn't, although in excess can decrease blood vessels.
Yeah, so as I said, the thing with alcohol is that of alcohol should not be a problem unless people might be taking medications that the alcohol interferes with, and it's really bad because it increases the chances of the side effects. So if we drink, for example, a glass of wine with a meal, it should be fine for as long as we're not taking a pill just before or just after, so that these two don't meet. When we drink alcohol, it makes our liver and kidney work harder. And the medication we might be taking throughout the day does the same. So if we are taking medication and then we're drinking alcohol, both will be slowing the metabolism further, on top of the already age-related changes that might be there, and possible dehydration. And maybe if we're sedentary, the metabolism slows down even more. So it is about thinking when we have the drink, whether we take any medication around it, which is probably best to avoid because it really clogs the kidney and liver. And the kidney and liver are responsible for clearing the medication out of the body. So protecting those in a way. So if we're taking medication in the morning and not in the evening, and we have a glass of wine in the evening with the main meal, and we hydrate well throughout the day, this usually should not represent any problems. But it is about how things get combined. So if we take medication in the evening as well, we have a glass of wine or two just before we take the meds, and we are not really well hydrated, this is where some things might not start working so well. So just thinking about how and when is important as well. There be any other questions? Mind elderly people is important exercise with brain example games. Yes, I completely agree. And this kind of links to the point that the combination of physical activity, cognitive stimulation, and social stimulation is really the winning combination for our aging well, together with staying well nourished, appropriately nourished, and well hydrated. Then I can see there's a question about water, 1 liter or 1.5 liters a day. So it would be 1.5 liters because this is the amount of liquids our body needs to do the processes that it needs to do at cellular level, which is not something that we really have control over. The only control we have over is really to make sure our body has enough liquids to mediate all the biochemical reactions that need to happen that are good for us. So the 1.5 liter would be really the minimum, the strict minimum that we should get in every day. Ideally, it would be closer to 2 liters. Tea is best herbal. It depends whether herbal tea is good. I drink a lot when it's cold. I make a kind of a flask of a very weak herbal tea, and then I make another flask of hot water, and I dilute the herbal tea as I go through the day because I just don't want to drink cold water. But I am doing this, and I'm mindful that I did check that it doesn't interfere with any medication I'm taking. So this advice about the tea and herbs needs to be sometimes checked with a pharmacist or GP if you're on multiple medications. Some herbs might just not be very good because there might be an interaction with the meds. So it's always best to check. Honey or cane sugar is best. Honey and cane sugar might be better than white sugar, but sugar is not really necessary in beverages. We drink to get hydrated. So if you need to have sugar in the beverages, then I would try to have those beverages with the main meal, because if you have it outside of the main meal, you're forcing the pancreas to work and work and work again and work more and inject more insulin. And the more we use it, the sooner the pancreas will get tired, and the sooner we might be at risk of glucose intolerance or type 2 diabetes. So just thinking about how and when we do what we like to do is a good part of aging. Yeah, I can see the comment, I can't drink water. I sometimes struggle with water as well, especially when it's cold. So the combination of the hot water and weak herbal tea kind of does it for me. But we all are slightly different, so we need to figure out ways in which to do that. Proportion of carbs, protein should we have to be nourished? This will depend on how our metabolism work, how easy we burn calories. For example, I try to avoid carbohydrates that I really don't need to have. So I wouldn't have bread every day. I wouldn't have pasta every day. I wouldn't have potatoes every day. I would have a bit of this in a day, but I would try to resource most of what I eat through vegetables and protein. Some days are better, some days are worse. And then, for example, my husband comes and he just constantly eats, and he eats bread and he eats pasta and he eats bread with pasta. And I'm just looking at it thinking, oh my gosh, how do you get away with it? And he is so thin. So this is just to illustrate an example out of many that we're not the same. So we need to know ourselves well enough to know how much carbohydrates we can have in the diet. And then if we happen to have a bit more, it's probably a good thing to just go and walk it off. So when I really have a moment and I feel I need something sweet, I would try to take a cake or piece of chocolate or something and take it for a walk. So if I'm, for example, going to pick up my son, before I go, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going for chocolate in a day, this is the best time to do it, because then you walk it off. So there is difference having chocolate or carbohydrates, a lot of carbohydrates in the middle of the day where you still will be active and out and about and you will burn it easily, than being hungry the whole day. Then you come home, you just sit down on a couch and suddenly you need to have pasta, you need to have bread, you need to have this, you need to have that. And then you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have the chocolate as well. And then you go to bed because then it doesn't get burned off. So thinking about when we have the carbs is kind of a good start as well. And protein, we should have protein in our diet regularly, because it is a building block for our muscles, and muscles are very important for our health. Any more questions?
Tamara asks, what type of exercise are best for women going through menopause?
That's a great question, Tamara. So again, this could be individual. Any exercise is great. Staying well nourished, staying outdoors, making sure we get some of the rays that stimulate the vitamin D creation is important, because this vitamin D then binds the calcium to our bone. So having enough calcium intake in our diet is important. Spending time outdoors, making sure that we have enough of that active D3 that binds the calcium to the bones, that protects them from getting porous and frail and osteoporotic. And then any exercise we like. So some of us will like resistance training, and it's a brilliant type of exercise and really has a demonstrated protective effect on our bones as well. But the cardio or resistance training is not for everyone. So if the resistance training is not for you, if you still decide to go out and walk and just stay active, not being sedentary and making use of the muscles, you will not be losing them. And for as long as you're not really losing muscles, your bones should be okay as well. So it is, and prevention is of course much easier than trying to remedy osteoporosis. But even if we're already affected by osteoporosis, the regular exercise is great, and it needs to be something we're able to do tomorrow again, because the regularity is really key, whether it's walking or gym or spinning or swimming. Anything is really great, and some things will work for some, other things will work for others. So it's kind of a not really pointed you to one single resource, but it's usually not one resource that sorts it all. It's the combination. Any more questions?
And then there's another question from Tamara. Is a high protein diet good for weight loss?
That is an excellent question. It would come to what works best for you as individual. High protein is a good start. It doesn't exhaust our pancreas. It's usually a diabetic diet. It should be high on protein. It just depends how your body will react to it and where the protein comes from. So if the protein comes from variable sources and it's plant-based protein, some of it is meat, some of it is fish, some of it is cheese and dairy, and it's a combination of sources. Mushrooms, nuts are an incredible source of protein. So the more varied the diet is, the better it is for a high protein diet. If the protein comes from red meat, mainly, it might start being difficult for our body to digest and clear everything out, because we're not made for a super hyper meaty diet. Meat is very good for us, but it should be part of the diet, not the main diet. So if we approach the high protein diet in terms of just eating meat, it long term it might not work so well, because there are other things that it will trigger, like high uric acid in the blood, and all that. So varied sources, varied nutrients, including plant-based diet, or including plants in our diet, dairy, if we can take dairy, and reasonably meat as well. So meat is important, but again, we perhaps don't need to overdo on meat, because there are other protein sources that can complement the picture. I can see we're nearly at time. We have 10 minutes left, and I'm happy to actually take those 10 minutes to really take more questions. I had a plan to actually talk to you about 5 to age well, which is an intervention that was born from the 5 pillars from aging well. But I'm also happy to share the slides, so kind of everyone who's here today can have a look at the 5 and on the take 5 and age well, and then come back to me but I'm very happy to take more questions, because sometimes kind of having a discussion is much more stimulating, interesting, and important than actually listening to me talking about yet another intervention. So would you be happy with that?
There's a comment from Jane. I have reflux and have to greatly reduce my acid intake and find replacing fruit difficult in my diet.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Reflux can be really tricky, and it can be very, very painful. And if it reaches a certain stage, we may need to take regular medication for that, which is not without side effects. So reflux can really be a huge problem. Some of it can be helped by a certain diet. I think some of it might be also helped through some exercise, because it is about making sure that our muscles are helping the stomach acids not leaking back up where they kind of cause the pain, which is the principle of reflux. So I think it would be a combination of things. Often one thing in an isolated way, or one thing only, would not have as good effect as a combination of things. So I think finding out what exercise might work. You might need to work with a specialist consultant. You might need to work with physiotherapists to find what is best, try it out and see how it works for you. But a kind of looking at the food intake, the diet is a very important start. So is it all fruit that makes you that makes the reflux worse, or is it just specific fruits? Hi, Jane.
Hello. Yeah, I've had cut a huge amount actually out of my diet, as well as all the nasty stuff like chocolate and everything else. But I find it's nearly all fruit, apart from I can manage bananas, melon, and mangoes, and kiwi. They're the main ones that I can have. So I've been sticking with those, and a pear now and again.
Mm-hmm.
But they're my only, so I have them regularly, but they're my only sort of sources then for fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, this can be tricky, because if the moment you cannot have certain fruits, it might make you deficient in terms of some vitamins in the diet. I would probably look if some of the fruits you can't have, what it has, and whether it can be replaced by vegetables, and or whether it might be worth having a chat with a GP, having a blood test to determine whether you being able to have just some fruit is not creating a long-term vitamin deficiency in some vitamins or minerals.
I've just literally had all my bloods done, and they've all come back fine.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I'm lucky as I really that they come back fine. And I just find, well, because I'm also dairy and wheat free as well, which I've been for 10 years. So I just find now, coming into my old age, the foods I can eat are being a lot more restricted.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that like I'm eating the right amount of the right foods, and to know really how much I should be eating really of vegetables and fruit compared to like carbs and protein.
Yeah, and it's often quite a journey, isn't it? Because it's really difficult to get it right. And if you get it right on one day, it doesn't mean that it's going to work exactly the same the next day, because in between you might not have slept as well, and that will just, the body will work slightly differently. So it really is a journey, and balancing anything for our health and well-being is more of an art than.
Yeah, well, I have FND, osteoporosis, and about a little string of lots of other conditions, chronic ones. So I'm getting used to pacing. That's been my life, pacing, for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting, I'm just realizing as I'm getting older, this is something I probably can control better, like you said.
Yeah.
And to be aware, and the water as well that you said, that's something I just do straight away, more of my meds, which would probably help. So I've had lots of really good information. It's been really good.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I would not neglect the physical activity. So if you can stay physically rather active rather than sedentary, it has an incredible, how do I say that, a resetting effect, because the body will figure out ways how to do something when it's used to make it work. The moment we have sedentary lifestyles and we sit more than we do anything else, the body starts behaving in a different way, and it's not always easy to bring it back to burn work.
Yeah, that's been my journey for 10 years, because I ended up in a wheelchair, and I literally worked from there over the 10 years with physios, so I can walk a bit now, but
Yeah,
I'm still very, very limited. But I've worked out that I can try and lie on the bed
yeah,
and do exercises that
yeah.
way as well.
Exactly. So that's fantastic, because that in this way you're finding ways to exercise that are actually available to you, which is making the body stronger and stronger. It is just taking longer. Yeah.
Oh, but thank you though.
I'm glad. And if you have any questions, Sarah, I'm very happy for you to share the slides with everyone, and there is my email address. So if a question that you didn't ask today comes to you, just please let me know and just drop me an email. I'm usually fairly quick in responding.
Oh, thank you ever so much. That'd be great.
Yeah. I have to say that the older I get and the kind of more sedentary my job is, it, it needed to build in some mechanisms to make sure that I move every few hours. I have a condition that predisposes me to forming blood clots, especially if being sedentary. So I'm kind of just very, very organized and incredibly rigorous and disciplined in how I affect that. So just stand up every 2 hours, do a bit of exercise, do a bit of walking, do 5-10 minutes of chores, 15 minutes of chores, or going out with fresh air, chop a few old that stems of flowers and just come back and resume the work. It has been something that I found that works, but also making sure that I take my son to school walking as long way as possible around the whole village and woods and everything. So it's building things, and it's the regularity. So the more we can exercise throughout the day, and I'm saying exercise, but it can be just being physically active, the better it is. And if we can do 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 15 minutes doing something else, it all adds up at the end of the day. So even if we can do a little bit, it's very good to do that little, and then in another 2 hours do another little bit. This is called exercise snacking, and it's been found very, very helpful, and muscle immunity and energy boosting as well. So if there are no more questions, I would like to say a huge thank you to you all to come here today and kind of chat and engage, because this is what makes the sessions much more interesting. Sarah will be able to share the presentation. I'm going to email it to Tamara. I don't think I have your email, Sarah. Tamara, is it okay? Can you forward it onto Sarah? Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm going to email this presentation to Tamara, and please get back in touch with me if you would like any more information on anything. And just huge thank you for coming here today and chatting.